I'd like to welcome everybody today to our panel discussion. This is a particularly interesting discussion, I think, about mastering outdoor design installations, and we're going to talk about some of the failures and what to do about that, how to achieve a better outcome. My name is Fran Worrell, and I'm the executive editor of Atlanta Magazine's Home. Show you a little picture here of our magazine, and we will have free copies, complimentary copies, there at the front table when you leave. So I'd like to introduce first our panelists. We have a very esteemed group of panelists here today. We have 3 designers and 2 installers. Our first designer, I'll start with him, is Kurt Kreisinger. He's owner and president of Lorax Design Group in Overland Park, Kansas. Kurt also co-founded the Tributary Revelation Group, which is a network of industry leaders that include architects and designers, contractors, who collaborate to create the world's premier outdoor living spaces and luxury pools. Our next designer is Randy Angel. Randy? Okay. Randy is the principal of Randy Angel Designs in Plano, Texas, and he has been in the industry for 40 years, and he has a heavy focus on outdoor design. His projects have won numerous awards, and they've been featured on HGTV and in numerous magazines, and he works with clients around the country. Our third designer is Bo Barnett. Bo is an architectural designer from Austin, Texas, and his firm, GB4 Designs, specializes in custom pool installations, spas, and resort-style outdoor environments. His award-winning designs have collected accolades from around the world, and he continues to influence the outdoor market through his innovative design concepts, and particularly porcelain pool installations. Our next panelist is Niall Watford. He is the owner and president of Noose Tile Service in Youngsville, North Carolina. His company has installed tile, stone, and related products in thousands of commercial and residential projects throughout the region, and he is also president of the GACA companies, whose members are recognized throughout the construction industry for their expertise and their experience in tile work. And he's heavily involved also in the development of standards and is doing a lot of pedestal systems in the North Carolina market. Our last panelist, also very involved in standards, is Niall Watford. He is, sorry. Our last panelist is installer James Wohlfeld, and he is president of Artcraft Marble and Tile in Phoenix. He is also the chairman of the NTCA Technical Committee. He's been involved in a lot of commercial and residential projects, and is particularly involved with consulting work when there is a failure of a tile installation and coming in and helping with that. So this is our panel. We have some really great things to talk about today, and we're going to sort of kick it off with an overview of trends in outdoor living. I think everybody knows that's been a big focus, and in our magazine, we feature something almost every issue about outdoor living and pools, and I think especially since COVID, the bringing the outdoors in and all of that has been a big push. So if anybody wants to chime, let's talk about some of the trends you're seeing over the next 1 to 2, 3 years very quickly before we get into material trends. Anybody?
I'll start. I know that as far as with my clients, a lot of the focus that we're seeing lately is, what are some of the new solutions with porcelain where we can replace using stone, natural materials around water, materials that can more easily deteriorate and cause issues. And so, thankfully there's so much more in the manufacturing industry that they're providing for us a lot of different options for more textures, more interesting shapes and things like that. In addition to the really large format, just having, even porcelain that looks like stacked stone, different interesting shapes and textures and whatnot. That's been a huge trend for me and my clients.
Yeah, I think one of the things I keep telling people is that, if you were rewind back to the 60s, pools back then, backyards, like what we designed, just outdoor living in general, were really simple. They were rectangular pools, like a 16 by 32, you had a 4 or 8 foot pad of concrete that extended beyond that for a pool deck, and there really wasn't much anything more than that. Today, outdoor living for especially high-end residential clients, and we also do commercial, everyone's competing to do something that new trend outside that's uniquely different. So I always say that the backyards or the swimming pools themselves have become like the Swiss Army knives of the tool shed. I mean, because they have every component on it you can imagine. And where you'll see a lot of these pictures from the three of us that we know each other really well is that everyone's wanting to add that a new feature, that thing tied to the pool, directly tied to the house. It's all about the adjacencies and how you can use these and entertain in different ways. And I'd say one of the features that Randy brought up is just the use of materials and how people want to integrate multiple different textures and things like porcelain that we couldn't 10 years ago use outside because of slip resistance and large format and turned down edges. And a lot of those manufacturers are responding to that so that we're able to take those things that we have been using for decades inside to the outside elements.
I agree 100%. I think one of the things that has really expanded our industry also is the demand for comforts like shade structures, things like outdoor kitchens, just a full outdoor environment that would cater to all the amenities that you'd have inside, whether that be fireplaces, whether that be, again, gourmet kitchens and pizza ovens and things of that nature. And with the implementation of porcelain, now you've got another tool in your belt to create a unique environment outdoor that's going to be sustainable in the long term. It's also made it a little bit easier. We're seeing a lot of trend on folks wanting to take the inside outside with them. And porcelain's allowing us to do that because some of the interior finishes now can be brought to the outside and it looks like a master design seamless transition. So I think that's where a lot of things are going right now as well.
Okay. What we're seeing and what we've experienced in the last several years is a transition from adhered systems to now pedestal systems and gravel laid, loose laid porcelain. But the advent of the material has allowed us to do a lot of that just because of the porcelain pavers that are out there and their unique qualities. And not only that, but as you see in some of these pictures, you've got porcelain panels that allow these great designers to do things that they couldn't do before with stone, or eliminates a lot of the problems with stone. So the advent of the materials and the installation methods, I feel like in our area, we're kind of in a transition period. We still get a lot of requests for adhered systems, but we try to push them towards a paver system that's either on pedestals or installed in a different way that eliminates a lot of the issues that we've had in the past.
In Phoenix, we're seeing the explosion of 2-centimeter porcelain pavers, light colors. We're not seeing a lot of pedestals yet, and the trend I'm seeing is people are taking a look at we have a lot of resorts in Phoenix, and they're taking that resort look and bringing it to their backyard. So that's the thing that we're looking at right now.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about installations and just the complexities. That's, I know that's a broad topic. We could probably talk about that all day, but does anybody have anything to, say about what are some of the complexities that are going on now with especially some of the newer systems and all that are coming out?
I mean, I'd like to reiterate what was said earlier with just the pedestal systems. What we're finding with a lot of our projects is that when we do get into something that's a little bit more contemporary, Randy and Bo do a lot of really contemporary projects, but with the swimming pools, but then you have to go outboard of that with the pool decks. And how do you get rid of some of the utilitarian things like drainage and skimmer box lids and things that they look out of the ordinary, and you want to kind of hide those. And so what you do is you go in and use a pedestal system, and you still have a pool deck. You're just pushing that pool deck, that concrete pool deck down, and you're creating what we call a coffer system. And therefore, your drains down below, your pool deck can be perfectly flat. And with large format porcelain, it's not like you can warp that material. I mean, so when you're turning the corners around a pool deck and everything's wanting to sheet in one direction, you're not cutting up pavers and creating a lot of mortar joints. So you got this really clean, crisp, large format porcelain that just reads simplicity. like some of these pictures. And therefore, what ends up happening is that you also have access to those areas to get underneath there and work on plumbing and lighting, low voltage lighting and drainage, things like that without ever seeing it in service.
You know, one of the biggest problems we had with adhered systems was you had to have movement joints, you had to have them spaced every 8 to 10 feet if you're doing it according to TCNA methods and ANSI standards. But you also had problems in a lot of cases if they were adhered decks. You may have living space underneath them, which are then called roofs. They're no longer balconies or decks. You had to worry about the waterproofing, where the water was going, how it was shedding. Now with the advent of pedestal systems, you're exactly right. The drainage is all underneath. You can put a lot of things underneath there, and you can take the pedestals from, I've seen them as short as 1/4 of an inch on the show floor, all the way up to 8, 9 inches tall. So the slope is actually in the substructure or the substrate that you're actually stacking it on. And a lot of that, the movement joints go away. They're not really pretty anyway. Nobody likes them, and they have to be maintained. You go to a much less maintenance intense issue or installation with a pedestal system, and it takes a lot of the normal headaches of an installation away. And James and I both do consulting, and I would say that's probably 30% of the failures that I see. And when we say failures, we're talking about complete delamination or breakdown of the system itself, and it won't stay adhered. And I've seen them in as short as 2 years.
We're a little bit different in Phoenix because of our temperature changes and our thermal expansion and contraction. Like I said, we don't see a lot of pedestals right now, but what we're seeing is a lot of sand set, 2CN porcelain pavers, which is, to me, is the way to go. Use polymeric sand, grout it with polymeric sand, gives you movement. I would say in Phoenix, there's not a lot of people that know what a movement joint is. The designer, the architect do a fantastic job of their vision, but there's a disconnect between their vision, what the GC builder wants to do, and what the installer wants to do. So I would say that my specialty in Phoenix when I'm doing consulting there is exterior veneers or exterior horizontal, and the lack of movement joints creates all the problems.
I would just add that as far as the installation goes, it needs to start with the education of what you're trying to do. You know, when you're talking about 2cm going all the way down, like some of these pictures that have a 3 millimeter, you know, very, very thin veneer on it, number one, you need to know the installation process before you even attempt it. A second thing that I would say, you need to have the right tools for the job, especially logistics, mobility, moving these things around, understanding how they need to be applied in a vertical manner is imperative to be successful. So it really starts with the education of the craft and then moving into, you know, the execution of that craft.
And going back to what you said about porcelain panels, we turned the pool down last year. You've got to know your limits. If you're an installer in here, you got to know your limits. And when we looked at this, between what the builder and the owner wanted to do and the porcelain panels, they wanted to put porcelain panels inside, outside. We don't want any movement joints. And I was like, I think we'll pass on that one.
And a lot of the porcelain panel work has gotten from just regular porcelain panel work to fabrication. So in a lot of designs, like James says, you got to know your limits of what you're able to do. But there is plenty of education tools. It's quite an investment in tools to do panel work like that. But getting to some of these pictures you'll see are outdoor roof decks that we've done. It allows you to open a space that never would have been thought of for tile. We did a condo project that was ended up being 32,000 square feet of rooftop decks, just from the suggestion, hey, what are you going to do with this space up here? Well, it's kind of unusable, and then they put an amphitheater right next door to it in a city park that was going to be like an entertainment venue. So all these people that were buying these condos got a free seat to look over into the venue just by the suggestion and each condo had 1,000 square feet. So don't be afraid to make a suggestion that these porcelain pavers and the panels are adaptive to a lot of different situations.
Anything you'd like to add, Kurt?
I was just going to add, and it's a little bit of reiteration, but depending on where you are in the industry, you know, as a designer, it's important for me to find the right builder who has the right installer, who has the right education, and understands how to utilize these new materials. We're able to do things today because of the advancements in manufacturing that I wanted to do 10 years ago, but it was, you know, next to impossible to do. And as the products become available to create these new looks, create these new details, that's all great, but it has to go hand in hand with education on, you know, what is the proper installation, and, you know, the knowledge base has to build up. So as a designer, you have to be careful. We want to be visionary, but then you have to definitely pair yourself up with the people who are going to responsibly educate themselves on that proper installation.
I look at it that porcelain has opened up a whole new world, a good world for homeowners. Okay, so I went to look at a $15 million house up in Scottsdale, white limestone, beautiful house, but they had landscaping everywhere around it, and the water migration was causing the limestone to stain, the white limestone to stain. And so I'm over there taking a look at it, and I'm like, well, it's really not anybody's fault. But he's asking, well, you're the expert. What would you have done? I said, I would have put 2 CN porcelain pavers in all day, white. But it reduces the maintenance of homeowners. You know, homeowners are like, oh, I don't want to maintain this, I don't want to do this. Their visions are pretty cool. Porcelain has opened up a whole new world in that, because now you can put all sorts of colors where you couldn't before due to moisture-sensitive stone or staining or anything like that.
Well, you've already sort of alluded to our next sort of topic here, but it's the importance that, you know, designers, installers, I guess homeowners, architects, that everyone collaborate. And so if you could talk to us, you know, a little bit about that and how some people maybe specify the wrong, I won't say wrong, but maybe they're not the best materials. And, you know, so let's discuss like proper training or collaborating between the different disciplines.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to say is kind of the joke in our industry for pool designers and landscape architects is that, you know, often we hear from home builders, custom high-end home builders, oh, I've got a tile guy that could do the installation on your pool project. And we're like, he gives these like $10 a square foot. And we're like, our guy's $100 starting off a square foot. There's a whole lot more training that goes into prepping a shell or a pool deck for a material that's going to be always subject to the environment conditions, whether you're in Phoenix, Texas, Minnesota, or in the New England. You know, it's different wherever we go. So having the proper education is key, and there's a lot of different formats out there for that. The three of us, that's how we all met, is going through education for pool design. But yeah.
I think that's
Yeah, I think that collaboration is key. You want to be on the same page with the designers and what their vision is. And sometimes that's hard to transfer to something that's visual. You get renderings and whatnot, but you need to talk to them about the technicalities of what you're doing, whether it can or cannot be done. And as has been reiterated several times, education is the key. These materials do not install like regular tile. It's a whole different application, a whole different product, different set of standards. There are not standards for porcelain pavers at the present time or pedestal systems, but suffice it to say we're working on that. The standards committees are, but it took us 10 years to develop a standard for porcelain panels and another 4 or 5 years to develop installation standards. That was painful, to say the least, but it was necessary to standardize the process so that we could educate based on what all the manufacturers were seeing and some of the field experience that was going on to avoid a lot of problems. So if you're going to attempt these things, make sure you get educated and you get some practice, because as beautiful as some of these pictures are, this didn't happen by guys that just or crews that just ended up doing this on a YouTube video and went out and did this.
Niall's pretty shy, but both Niall and I sit on the TCNA handbook and the ANSI committee. Niall's vice chairman of ANSI, and I'm chairman of the NTCA technical committee. So we deal with standards all day long. We had an ANSI meeting, a technical committee meeting on Sunday here. This is one of the big things. We just developed a paper for pedestals. The pedestals and the pavers right now are going through testing in order to get their own method and standard. And like these gentlemen said, it's important to know who's installing these products because these are a different animal than your 12 by 24 porcelain that you see.
And I think that, and as far as that collaboration goes, they've got to have confidence in us, and we've got to have confidence in them.
Yep.
That they're not going to say, okay, you've got 2,000 feet of this material in, but that's not what I wanted. We got to have confidence that they know what we're doing and we know what they want. And then you throw the homeowner into the mix often, and that kind of muddies the water from time to time. So it's an interesting collaboration, but it has to be constant. I would say a pre-job conference is mandatory, and then communication throughout the project is also encouraged.
Last thing, communication, open and honest, transparent communication. We're all adults. Just start with that. And 2, oversight on our end and on their end too. But a lack of oversight is what drives 99% of the problems that we see.
Really.
Yep.
I'd agree.
I would also add that, as a designer, it's easy to think, I can use this videography and create something absolutely amazing and then just sell it, and then somebody else is going to build it, and I don't really have to worry about it. Well, if you don't know the limitations of the install, and if you don't know the limitations of the material that you're using, you can't really expound on the installation. You can't really comment and help your builders to understand where they may run into some really difficult problems down the road. And you also won't be able to explain to the homeowners what their expectations should be, which should be done at the very beginning of the sale or the presentation.
And there's a big difference between residential and commercial. In the residential world, design build works a little better when you have someone that is a good designer, like these guys, and then also can do the build side. Whereas on the commercial side, you have to go pull a permit, and you got to have a full set of documents. But design build is still apparent in the commercial world. And where we see the most failures is that relationship, because the GC doesn't really know what they're looking for. And if they don't have a good set of documents to trust that they're not skipping corners that inspectors don't know what to look for, then you inherently have those problems. It's a weak link in the chain. You can do a great set of construction documents, and if the GC doesn't know what he's looking at, the drawings may guide him, but if the inspectors that are coming out and looking at these things, then they have no clue, and then it could still be a failure. So then you end up with someone like yourself going out and looking at a project and saying, okay, something was missed along the way. So regulation is something that really needs to be more mandated in some of these municipalities.
What's refreshing is very rarely do I get to sit and talk to designers that are knowledgeable. So this is refreshing to me because where I am, it's literally we're in the Wild West. We just finished a $3 million or $750,000 pool complex at a resort. And we did mock-ups, and we had the owner's rep, and we had the architect and the designer flying in from Nevada to look at it. And so there was some proper oversight. The designers were flexible, and it turned out gorgeous. But it was the open communication, the designer and the architect knowing what they were doing. It's not always true that they know what they're doing. These gentlemen know what they're doing. And not to say designers are bad or architects are bad, but sometimes they want something, like you guys were talking about. They envision something, but they don't understand what it takes to get there.
And that's part of the education process. Not only everybody on the stage or people we're representing have to be educated, but it was key. It was interesting you said the inspectors. A lot of times the inspectors don't know what they're looking at. And they will turn down things that have no issue at all, that have been passed, that have standards, have ICC codes, and they're not aware of them. So part of that education on your part actually goes back to helping educate the inspectors sometimes as well.
Anybody else? Okay, well, now we're really going to get into some of the pitfalls and challenges, and we've touched on those, of course, but everything from qualified labor, education, or lack thereof, resources, proper labeling, proper selling, which is checking the testing and ratings data, and then some weather and moisture concerns, everything that could be a pitfall in an installation we're going to talk about here. Plus a really interesting aspect, value add of some of these projects versus even a value negative to the property value if there is a failure. So I know that's a big topic, but anybody want to kick that off?
Go ahead.
I would just start with understanding as a designer and an installer that the vendors of these products and the manufacturers of these products spend millions of dollars in research on how to install their product. So you really need to be familiar with the specific material and work hand in hand with the vendor so that, again, you understand where the failures can come from and how to make sure that you're not put in that position. I mean, thermal expansion is a pretty big deal, and in Texas, when it's 110 degrees and humidity is about 90%, you think you're about to melt. You can't put on some of these applications. It has to be tinted. It has to be air controlled. If you don't know to do that, and all of a sudden you go out and you slap some of this on a wall, it's coming off, and it's coming off quickly. And so that's, again, a part of understanding the vendor's going to give you, hey, this needs to be installed under 90 degrees. It needs to be, UV protected for this long. The curing times for these grouts and for these thin sets are, they have standards for them. So if you don't know those standards and you're not educating yourself specifically with that vendor, because each vendor is going to have different standard operating procedures for their particular product, then you're not doing your client a service.
I would say from the installation end, everything changes outside. Once you go outdoors, it's a different animal. So you better know what's going on from the standard side, from the installation method side, and even some of these systems are proprietary. So you better get education or have a rep on site that is willing to back you up and give you the right installation system to make sure these will perform. You mentioned thermal swings. We've got those too in North Carolina, and something they don't have in Texas very often is we get snow, freezing rain, and the very next day, if you can't catch pneumonia in North Carolina, in anywhere, you can get it in North Carolina because the next day it could be 72 degrees. But remember, 72 degrees and ambient temperature could be 100 degrees on those pavers. So we have installation limitations, but we also have thermal swings that could be as much as 60, 70 degrees, and that can change within an hour. You get a good cold rainstorm on a summer day. So that, with the adhered systems, that was a huge issue. Not as much of an issue, but with adhered systems around some of these pool decks, parapet walls, that kind of thing, you're going to see some of that, and you need to take all that into account.
I'd say on the cost side has been a big benefit. We have a separate business that we sell materials to our clients specifically. We're not a retailer that people walk in off the street and come to. We're only catering to our own clients, but we feel that's important to the entire design process, as we're going to design it, sell a vision, and then do construction documents, and expect a contractor to follow through. We don't want the contractor, if we don't have control over who's doing that, picking a different material. But the cost along the selection process has been nice because, I like stone. As a landscape architect, I use stone on every project. But as we know, stone's really expensive. So is the infrastructure of just getting that, the logistics of getting it from across the country or another continent over to the States in a container. Well, porcelain, because it's lighter weight, and it offers larger material sizes that some manufacturers of stone can't do because of the weight restrictions and everything else. They have to go thicker with the stone when they cut it. It's just, you could do a 2 cm or 3 cm large format material, and it's going to be a lot less than stone. So a lot of times our clients in the last 5 or so years have gone that direction because they could get the same aesthetic. They want bluestone or a marble look or travertine. It's all out there and available. So it's been really nice from that perspective.
I've been told not to be negative because I do a lot of presentations and coverings with failures. I have a separate consulting company from my contracting company. And when I get called out, it's not a good situation, but It's usually a breakdown from design to install, and 99% of the time, it's the installer not understanding these new materials because they're a whole different ballgame. Thermal expansion and contraction in Arizona. Our surface temperatures in the summer can hit 180 degrees without a problem, and then 15 minutes later, we have a thunderstorm and we're down to 90 degrees. So we have thermal shock. And I'm a big proponent of movement joints. And I've always said, when there's a problem with a designer or an architect, I said, you guys are imaginative. So you are imaginative to put things to make it look like it's supposed to look. Not these gentlemen here, because they obviously know what the hell they're doing. But movement joints in my area, especially for exterior materials, remember, the bigger the tile that you're using, the more thermal expansion and contraction you're going to have. It's geometric. Okay? Smaller tiles expand, but bigger tiles expand more. Okay? So that's something you have to look for.
And all materials are different. That's why I keep telling our clients, I mean, porcelain's one thing, but you've got stone, steel, glass, wood. They all expand completely differently. So we're big proponents of using expansion joints. But where we see failures on large format is on the pool side is where you have that thermal shock. Because like in Kansas City, we can have over 200 freeze-thaw cycles in one season. I mean, we're right there in the middle where we could have a day that's 75 degrees, and that evening it's 15 degrees with wind chill, but even drops below that. So, I mean, we have the same kind of thing you have in a different way, but we have freezing ice and things like that during the wintertime. So when you got an exposed bond beam or affinity edge, and you've got large format on it, and you don't have expansion joints, and it's 80 foot long, all those tiles, I've just seen them buckle and fall off on projects where they didn't think about that.
Well, you made a great statement about the millions of dollars that these manufacturers and distributors put into research. Your setting material companies do the same thing. Your waterproofing companies do the same thing. All you have to do is use the products in which they were meant to be used. Period. That's all you got to do. It's not hard. Like Niall said, he wanted to do a seminar next year at Coverings called Read the Instructions.
Okay, since we're not being negative, now let's go to a positive. Let's instead of talking about all the pitfalls, let's talk about the value add. I mean, really, let's wind this up on a higher
If I don't say something positive, my wife's going to remind me after, because
yeah,
she always
well-
says, you focus on the 10%.
That's
negative.
we're here to educate, but also let's talk about some of the great things that can be done now with the new materials and the added value for the homeowner. And
I think in general, just talking to the right people and making the experience fun. You know, we have a lot of custom home builders in our community. I mean, probably more per capita than around the country. It's a lot of smaller home builders that are doing really high homes, and people traditionally go to those home builders and with the expectation that it's going to be a fun process. A lot of times you'll spend 6 months to a year working with an architect. When they come to us, I recognize they've just been beat up because they've been picking materials and finishes for the house, and these are multi-million-dollar homes. And they get outside, and they're going to spend $500,000 to $2 million in the backyard. We want to make that process exciting. So to be able to open up a lot of these vendors' product books and show the available colors and the rich. It used to be, I thought a porcelain was like a white or a tan. You know, there wasn't a whole lot of flexibility with that. And now you walk these showroom floors, and that's what we were talking before we came in. Like, what was the thing that really stood out to you? And some of the large format material that just is translucent and the thin that you can bend. I mean, they've come a long ways. So it's exciting.
One of the things that I would add, Kurt's already said, is the value engineering of the porcelain as well. You know, I mean, while a lot of us work with multi-million-dollar homes, there's also a lot of clients that don't have multi-million-dollar homes, and they cannot afford Italian Carrara marble all over the outside of their swimming pool. But the porcelain can give you an option that looks like a marble finish and looks like exotic materials without having the process, the logistics, and the complications that come with a lot of exotic materials. So that's one thing where I think major value has been added with some of the porcelain products to create more of an exotic appearance, but not necessarily, reap that price tag.
Like one thing I've never had a client say to me is, I want as much maintenance issue as you can give me. Give me the worst material you can think of that I'm going to have to scrub nobody wants that.
Perfect.
So I think the biggest value add for the client has been, the ease of maintenance when we can develop these looks in porcelain and these other materials that are much easier for them to maintain on a normal, this is my life basis. I don't have time to deal with it. And I think it's opened up some incredible doors. Now, the majority of my work is a more modern kind of aesthetic, and in that, my client doesn't want to see, limestone that's starting to deteriorate over time or discolor because water from the irrigation system is spraying on it and things like this. They want what it looks like on day one, they want it to look that way in year 5 with very little maintenance
They
necessary.
literally want to go back there with the hose and wash it off, and you can do that with porcelain.
Yeah.
And to add to that, what we haven't talked about is we're talking materials, but the materials to put it up with. The waterproofing systems, the epoxies that are out now. We primarily are using epoxies on a lot of things because we don't want efflorescence.
Right.
And whether we're using it for stone products or porcelain, it's just, there's a lot of great products out there that provide less maintenance because of that alone. And the ease of install. It used to be epoxies, you used to think about it, it was just really hard to work with. And now a lot of our guys, they won't go back because of that issue alone.
Yeah, my guys prefer epoxy for just about everything. It was a learning experience. And we took all of our masons and said, look, for the next week, we're going to do this over and over and over, and we're going to talk about it, and you're going to ask questions, and I'm going to sit here and actually do it with you because I'm a terrible mason, but I know how to do it. And so these guys, they were very hesitant to start working with the epoxies, but once they did, and we have the system down, now they prefer it because it's a quicker system. It's actually an easier system. I've got quite a bit less mess to deal with, believe it or not. And the longevity of it is pretty hard to
And
beat.
you'll like this, it's also flexible. I mean, a lot of their systems are
Sometimes.
flexible, so the expansion from that standpoint, the client's not going to appreciate that if it initially, but someday when it's hot, you got these thermal coefficients of
And we
swing.
see the client wants that, they don't know they want it, but you have to educate them that, hey, this is what you want because you want the system to perform. And a lot of times the clients come to us and they haven't had the expertise of gentlemen like this to help them design everything. They got a sketch on a napkin and they walk up and say, this is what I want, and I want to use this limestone in this climate. And so you have to re-educate them and back them around to say, well, how about if we did this? But it's important that I see installers participate in the process. They don't just sit back and wait for this. This is where we get into helping with the design and assisting with that, both helping folks that may not be as educated as these gentlemen up here, helping them understand what the limitations of the materials are. Do epoxies work in all situations? Sometimes they don't. What can you do? What can't you do? And that's why it's imperative that installation contractors attend things like coverings, where you can come get this information for free, I might add, and you can talk to people on the show floor that are more than willing to give you educational information. You've got installations going on all day long on the installation stage. And I don't want to say you're giving restrained expectations, but you're giving correct expectations, educated information back to the customer, back to the designer, back to the general contractor, who oftentimes just sits there with his mouth open going, I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Well, going back to value add, we've talked about the maintenance, the ease of maintenance. And like Niall said with the condominiums, you've taken a backyard or a living area and you've expanded it into a resort type
An
look,
oasis, yeah.
an oasis, and sure, your house is going to be more valuable because people are going to go back there and go, wow, I want that house.
Absolutely. Well, before we open up to some Q&A, we have a very important topic here, which is best practices and standards, development of standards. And so, what's the chicken and the egg? I've been told you can't develop standards until you have some successful installations. But where are we with standards for some of these new materials, and sort of speak to that and where you see the industry going there?
Like Niall said, it took 10 years for us to develop, and actually the tile manufacturers, the porcelain panel manufacturers came back to the NTCA and said, help. because they were having failures with the material. They're putting 3 millimeter on the floor, on the ground in an airport.
Right.
Pretty stupid idea. And so they came back to us. It took us 10 years to get an ANSI standard. There's one standard for the installation of GPTP or gauge porcelain panels, and it's ANSI 10819. We're working on 137.3 for 2cm pavers and things like that right now. And I think we're going to have something probably in the next year, which is pretty fast. It's light speed now. And then Woody Sanders with DW Sanders here in Atlanta is one of the foremost experts when it comes to pedestals. And he just brought a paper to the NTCA Technical Committee, and in union with the TCNA, all that information is going to the TCNA to develop a standard for pedestals.
Yeah, and that is, I said before, it was painful, but it was necessary. Brand new product to the industry, somewhat like porcelain pavers. They're not like tile. They don't install the same way, don't use the same products. So all this standards development is being done behind the scenes that really nobody sees in these meetings. Those committees are comprised of industry experts, from architects to manufacturers to distributors to installers, and all these products go together. But some of these committees are 65, 70 people, so sitting in a room for a full day.
And you
No
have
wonder
to-
it takes so long, right?
Well, you have to get consensus.
Yeah, you have to
So
have
one person can stop a standard. And so that's why the standards are so difficult, because one person may have a bad morning that morning.
And that negative, if they vote negative on a standard, that negative has to be resolved before we can go forward.
Yeah, we've had multiple standards stopped by one vote. And so we have to go, whoever's developing the standard has to talk to the other person to resolve their negative or adjust the verbiage in the standard and make them happy.
And it's a collaborative process with all these people, but in the end of it, you've got a really solid document that is actually applicable to the installations that are happening around the country, because you've got input from people actually we do this internationally too, so you got input from around the world on how these installation standards affect what's being seen and what shows up on Pinterest or Houzz that somebody wants to, hey, I saw this, I want this in my backyard, or I want this on my deck.
At Coverings, they have the ANSI meeting, and it's open to the
Right.
public. So if you guys either want to be really bored to tears or understand how things are done when it comes to ANSI, it's free to come in, and you can watch how the 50 to 60 brightest people in the world discuss how to make our industry better.
You get to see how the sausage is made. Sometimes it's not pretty, but it is interesting in that you get all this input from different aspects. But suffice it to say that what comes out of those committees is solid, and you can rely on the installation methods. But what happens and what we see from a consulting side is that that is not always adhered to. And I don't personally like going to see failures in our industry, because I think it's a black eye, but it gives us an opportunity to educate as well. And you mentioned qualified labor before. The qualified labor are the folks that are here. They're trying to get educated, that are trying to learn more about their craft. And there are different things that recognize the quality of the labor that's installing these products. And it pays to do a little research, and I would encourage any general contractors to do the same thing with your installers. Find qualified labor that has the experience to do this kind of stuff that will result.
To make their visions become real.
Make their visions reality without headaches.
Yep.
But I would say also, it takes some boldness on the side of designers, on builders, in lieu of these standards that will be coming down the pike at some point. We have to be willing to, push that line with education, with the knowledge, and do our, best due diligence to use these new products in a way that is going to help in the development of these standards.
Well, what you're talking about, yeah, we don't have standards, but we do have proprietary installation methods
Right.
from manufacturers. And
we do have industry best practices that may not be in a standard, but we know they work. And I strongly encourage checking with the setting material manufacturers and the tile manufacturers, their technical departments. They want this information out there. They want to see their product installed, and they've got to get so much installed in order to get experience for the standard. So use them as a resource.
But finally, I think going back to inspectors is that something's got to happen to get municipalities to be on board with getting their buildings and codes people to come to shows like this.
Yeah.
And to have an interest, because they're the ones that are really the weak link in the chain. Sometimes we think it's the contractor that's installing on the tail end, but if those guys are also educated, but someone along the line is missing something a trade did, and it's just building block for someone else, and that fails, then fingers get pointed and everyone's upset. And no one wins but the lawyers.
That's exactly right.
And the consultants.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. There could be perfect. You guys do it perfect. I could see your work. I can hear what you're saying. It's everything that I would dream about for working for somebody like you guys. We do our job on our end. Like you said, you have somebody that's not knowledgeable that comes in and does an inspection, doesn't know what the ICC, IBC, IRC is, or how the products work. Yeah, they're going to cause the problem.
And even not approved things that we know are done right. We have a couple projects like that now, and it holds up the whole project for a month because someone doesn't know what they're looking at, and they think it's wrong. But you're like, let me explain to you and educate you why it is. And so it's very frustrating.
People are afraid to have the adult conversation. If they don't know, they don't know, and then they run and hide. It's okay. It's okay not to know anything, because if you don't ask that question, 5th grade, 3rd grade, whatever, the only bad question you ask is the one you don't ask.
And another resource would be like NTCA. We have a 5-star contractor group. There's 50, 55 of us across the country. But we are able to give presentations to the architectural community that gives you continuing ed credits. We could do the same thing for inspectors. I actually enjoy doing those. We educate, not only these are prepared by the NTCA, and we get to talk about our experiences during the presentation. Generally you can do them on a lunch and learn basis, but it's tremendous as far as the education, and it helps drive business your way.
Yeah, so now we're going to open up the floor to Q&A now. So anybody want to ask? Okay, back there.
On commercial jobs, that's pretty common, where they require a special inspector to be a part of the contract. And banks actually require that before they release any, on draws, to where certain inspections are met along the way. But on the residential side, I've never seen it, unless we've had a really educated client that has been a part of that arena, like a developer that's building his own residence, and he wants someone to come in and look at footings and foundations or setting beds or just monitor the project regularly on a day-to-day basis. So it's challenging. But
Yeah, the only place that I've seen that occurring is when it comes to structural engineering. My structural engineer has in his contract where he will come and inspect the process of that engineering, but as far as installation, I've never seen anything like that.
Are you acting like an owner's rep or someone that's...
Sort of a project manager for...
Yeah, our biggest headaches, we've got 2 projects where people are dropping $1.5 million in their backyard, and each one of them are managing the project themselves. And these are very successful people. And I tell them, I don't advise that this is a good idea. And they go, what do you mean? Isn't it just one guy that does all this stuff? I'm like, no, one guy that can manage all this, but you may have 16 to 20 different trades in your backyard. And if you don't have someone there on a day-to-day basis managing the chaos, really what that person is, that project manager, is an overpaid babysitter. Because he's managing expectations with the owner, he's managing the schedule and sequencing of trades, making sure that, certain things happen so that you don't lose that time window for someone to come in and throws the whole schedule off. So it's so important, but if a guy's a surgeon or an attorney or someone else that's got a full-time job and even works more, and you can't get a hold of him during the day when concrete guys need to be there because they have no window, then you miss that opportunity.
To answer your question, we do in-job consulting. I'm actually doing one now, house in South Carolina on the coast, really high end, and the owner was really nervous about products. He was using a lot of tile, which we love. We're not doing the installation, but I met with the installation contractor. They requested that we meet with them, go over all the installations, meet with the architect, talk about the limitations of the product. And just 2 weeks ago, I was down looking, they're probably 70% through, finished with the installations. We went over, did the same process again, made sure they were on track. And one of the things that we talked about was a pool installation with 1x1 glass mosaics, and what the limitations of that were and what they needed to do before they completed it. Thankfully, we got there and were able to review it before they made some errors that would cost them some at least maintenance, if not failure, down the line. And do the same thing commercially. I was just in the Smithsonian 2 weeks ago doing the same thing for a client that was deathly afraid of the architect and the owner because they had issues in a prior phase that they didn't want to have in the second phase. And they brought us in to say, hey, are we doing this correctly? What do you see? Give us some ammunition to support ourselves, but also give us a report that we can give to the owner and the architect to assure them that it's being done correctly. So, yeah, we can do it during the process.
You don't see it a lot on residential. I do the same thing. I do quality assurance. I'm overseeing the Denver National Airport right now, the Grand Hall renovation, and they had problems on phase 1. So they hired me for phase 2 and phase 3. I'll be there until July of 25. I go up there about every 3 weeks for the same reason. And right now, my biggest battle is against the architect. And I look at you like you guys are bad. We've written 66 RFIs back to the architect right now to explain to him what a movement joint is and why it's needed in 250,000 square feet of tile.
And how to construct it.
And how to construct it. So even on a project like that, it's an $8 billion project, you have a breakdown in communication. And you do everything you can. I can see how responsible you guys are, because you talk the talk and you walk the walk, and you would be a dream to work for in a situation like that, because you actually take what we're saying and absorb it, and then you can explain it to your client.
But to answer this question, though, too, there's a difference between architects, landscape architects, engineers that could do CA, which is construction administration,
Right.
versus someone that actually manages your job. And what we have found is that custom home builders have all their trades underneath them, but like we talked earlier, those same trades are not the same trades you're going to hire for your outdoor jobs. So what ends up happening is you try to find that unique unicorn, which is someone that could go out and really manage all these materials and finishes and installations and vendors and understand it at a different level in the backyard. Those are hard to find. Now, Bo does his own stuff, so he can manage all that himself. Randy and I are designers. We don't have that control over those people to manage that necessarily. So
I will say that my in-house supervisors, though, they're very highly educated. That's the platform we start with to being able to understand my vision and be able to execute it. It starts with their certifications and the hard work that it takes to get to the point to where they can manage those. In fact, one of my general manager is not with us this week because we have 2 major projects going on. He said, if you and I are gone at the same time, I'm going to be so nervous that I'm not going to be able to listen or pay attention or do anything. Please let me stay.
And that's the oversight aspect we were talking about.
Yeah.
That's where it breaks down at oversight. I'm telling you right now, failures I look at, the successes I look at, you can see the difference between oversight and lack of oversight.
Maybe this is a new career field for people out there to become project managers for residential jobs. I don't know.
what kind of backyards are you doing? What kind of amenities?
Are you an installer? I'm an installer, yeah. Well, Niall was just telling you about NTCA.
Correct. So there are things to do, like certification classes.
Yep.
Is NTCA
NTCA and a lot of the manufacturers have online universities, quote unquote.
You have to do that, and you have to get yourself a TCNA handbook and an ANSI book. Because you have to know exactly how it goes in, and you have to know exactly what goes into doing it.
But there's tons of trade shows you can go to. You got the International Swimming Pool and Spa and Deck Show, and they have all kinds of classes you could take that are educational. The three of us took a program called Genesis, which there's a new university out there called Water Shapes. I'm actually a faculty member of that, to learn about outdoor environments. It's not just the pool. We've expanded it to a lot of broader reach. You got the ASLA show you can go to, American Society of Landscape Architects. They have regionals, and they also have international shows or national shows. And they all have classes you could take. I mean, so just you have to be open to looking at what's available out there and go to one and figure out if it's what you, see what you gain from it. Like the coverings, the first time I went to coverings, my mind was blown. Yeah. I was like, oh my goodness, you know, what have I been doing? For the
And
last
most
20 years?
manufacturers will help you and guide you. You know, you look at Schluter and you look at other companies like that, they have their own training programs that they spend a couple days on explaining to people how to do things. So there's a lot of resources. And it's not really hard to find them. You just have to look in the right places.
And it's a big investment in time, but it's worth it. It's 100% worth it. You'll find yourself a year or two down the road knowing quite a bit more than you thought you could have, just by allowing the leaders of the industry to really mentor you through that process.
And that's the one up on your competition that you're going to have, is that you're going to be able to present yourself as an educated installer about these products, and you can talk. It gives these guys comfort, gives your GC comfort, gives your customer comfort that you know what you're talking about. You're not just winging it when you come on the job.
And education costs money. So it's going to, either your time, by getting educated, that costs money because your time's money, or having a failure. You'll get educated through that, okay? That's what I
Failure's
tell.
much more expensive.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. That's what I tell people about it. You know,
graduate
you go,
degree,
yeah, you go to college to get an education. You have a failure, you're going to get an education.
Those are memorable.
Yep. You'll become better after that, but you really don't want to go through that.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about 2CM right now. There are standards for GPTP. There are standards for them, okay? And there's standards for
Panels.
gauge porcelain tile.
Gauge porcelain
tile panels, GPTP, GPT. And so, because that's how they call it now. We used to call it gauge porcelain, but they have GPTP and everything else like that. But there are standards for those. There's ANSI standards. And so those already have standards. Direct adhered veneers, those have standards. It's the 2CM that we don't, and the pedestals we don't, and the sand set we don't.
But it's in the process.
Yeah. And bug the hell out of your supplier. Bug the hell out of your
That's what I was
manufacturer.
just going to say.
Right. Hey. Your distributor and your material manufacturers will be your best resources because your distributor wants to sell the product. Believe me, they want to sell it. I see Frank over here, Frank Donahue, and he wants to sell you the product. Your material manufacturers really want you to use their products. Okay, so they're going to help. They're going to help with this process.
And they're going to help direct you too, because I know Frank, and Frank doesn't want to sell you product just to sell product. He wants to sell you product that will perform correctly. And that takes an educated installer, so they'll help direct you to those paths, to those manufacturers that'll give you that information.
Yeah, and if you're in an area where, maybe your supplier is not quite as knowledgeable or helpful for you, go to the manufacturers. Go all the way to the manufacturer, because they will educate you on their products and help you determine proper use, proper installation, all of those things. But don't be afraid to go to that level. Don't rely on your local people if you don't feel they have the knowledge and expertise that are going to set you where you need to be.
One suggestion and one recommendation. If you get something from them of a product they tell you to use, get it in writing. Because if it doesn't perform as they say it would, you got some backup.
And if they don't have it in writing, just move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question. I think I saw somebody over here that had yes.
As an installer, how do you backstop means and method development based on a geographic area? Meaning the standards are written, but how does an installer know their geographic area's demand on the product without having expertise and also without having direct access to the material supplier or manufacturers and a rep that is geographically educated for those conditions?
Where's your geography?
Well, it's relative. It doesn't matter across the U.S. whether it's moisture or
Use the materials and the manufacturer's technical resources. So if your rep's not available or if you're in an area that he doesn't visit twice a year, may not be as responsive as you want, go to their technical departments. Most of them even have chat rooms now that you can get online and talk to them about it. If they don't know, they'll actually find out and get you information, but use them as a resource.
You got a smartphone?
yeah, but I think you're taking just a little bit. These guys over here pushing innovation in the design application
Right.
for these materials.
Right.
So as an installer, how do you know when they step a little bit outside of that box?
Well, I said it earlier, material manufacturers and tile manufacturers get together. There's proprietary systems that are outside of what the standards are. Remember, the standards work this way. TCNA, ANSI, manufacturer's recommendations rule all. So if the manufacturer of the products tell you you can do it this way, doesn't matter what ANSI or TCNA says, but like Niall just said, you get it on their letterhead. Once you say, I want it on your letterhead, either it gets back like this to you because they're proud of
Exactly.
it, or you hear silence. And when you hear silence, like you said, you walk away.
Move on.
Yep.
So do you tell installers to go the other direction when they're dealing with a designer that's kind of immovable on that topic?
You know what? Some of the best jobs you get are the ones you don't get. I've walked away from plenty of jobs. He's walked away from plenty of jobs. We did a seminar called "It's Okay to Say No."
What you don't want, you want to walk away before you get kicked off the job.
Yeah.
And that is the bad advertising that you don't want. The good advertising is what we were talking about being educated. That word spreads just as quickly as bad advertising as well.
Obviously,
You
what
become a
I've-
go-to resource.
Obviously, from today, I would really want to work for these people right here. And so you looked at these people as the model or the standard in which the people are in your area. And if they can compare maybe one half of what these guys do, I think you're going to be in good shape.
It's all about checks and balances. My staff has known me for a long time, and we'll go through a design phase. And design phase is like a honeymoon. You're having fun, dreaming and exploring different concepts and how do you create that perfect oasis. But when you get through design phase and you start talking about construction documents, that's where the rubber meets the road. You start talking about technical things. And if we knew through the design process that this person kind of had a Medusa and reared its head and like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I want to work with this, my staff is raising the red flag, like, let's don't proceed. So don't be afraid to fire your client at any time because you don't want to get it too far along and realize this is going to be a headache for everybody.
Okay, we have gone over, and I apologize for that, but it's been fun. It's gone quickly. But thank you all so much for coming to this session. Again, we have some magazines. We're co-sponsors, Atlanta Magazine's Home. Thank you very much.
Great job.
Thank you.